Hello, everyone. Welcome to Istio on the Enterprise webinar. A few housekeeping before we kick off, and please submit any questions in the questions panel. We'll answer it at the end of the presentation. So, Scott, you would like to introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you, Uday. So I'm Scott Cranton. I'm with Tetrate. I'm part of our technical field, which means I have the great pleasure of working with many of our enterprise customers that are deploying Kubernetes, deploying Istio, and getting a good sense of what it takes to help them be successful. And thank you for allowing us to do this session with you.
Right. This is Uday Shetty. I manage technology partner integration at Mirantis, and I work with partners like Tetrate to deliver end-to-end solution to our customers. So the objective of the session is to provide our users on what is Istio, how Istio helps customers on their container journey, application services, and how do you manage a microservices-based application with Kubernetes and Tetrate service bridge? So the agenda will be, we'll go over the overview on the Mirantis cloud-native platform, some of the challenges customers are facing with microservices, how Istio helps resolve the challenges, and Tetrate service bridge, and wrap it up with our summary. So when we talk about the Mirantis cloud-native platform, our goal is to make sure we provide choice to our customers. It has to be simple, and it has to be secure by default. And wrap it up with Lens so that developers can consume Kubernetes, debug, and trace everything that they can do over this interface. And Mirantis Container Cloud provides a simple way to provision, deprovision child clusters. So when we say choice, we provide the product at every level you have a choice. This is based on whether it's bare metal or the second layer of OS. So we support our product in each and every layer so that users have a choice whether to run on-prem or cloud, or any OS for that matter. So even from an infrastructure standpoint, you could run it on whether it's cloud, VMware, or any bare metal, or Equinix bare metal. So from a cluster standpoint, we talk about Mirantis Kubernetes engine, which we support Swarm as well. So, and on top, the overarching layer is the Mirantis Container Cloud, which I'll talk more about it. And the top layer is about tooling, where the application services makes all the difference. So these toolings are based on open source CNCF standard. So when we talk about simplification, it's basically trying to bring a consistent cloud experience to our developers and operators. So from a developer standpoint, when we talk about Mirantis Container Cloud, what developers need is to provision, deprovision clusters, make sure that you create apps or portability for their code. From an operator standpoint, what they are looking for is, how do I manage this cluster? Does it provide a lifecycle management? How do I make sure the logging, monitoring, alerting, that those capabilities are there? And Mirantis Container Cloud provides these capabilities so that developers and operators can have a consistent experience. So when we talk about, security, security has become extremely important in our landscape because of continuous the amount of attacks that go into this cluster, whether it can be on infrastructure layer, clusters, containers, and applications. So from a cluster standpoint, Mirantis provides clusters, security as a default itself. So when we talk about security, we talk about securing the image first. Then, you can sign the image. Then Mirantis container runtime, which is FIPS 142 validated and also supports DSA state. Then securing network. So we have to make sure all the traffic flows on TLS. And securing users, whether it's rollback access control, who has access to these clusters. So overall, you have to make sure that it's from a developer and operator standpoint, it's a complete secure supply chain that flows from left to the right. So what happens here? Now, we have secured from a bare metal, from an infrastructure to clusters to the container layer. So what happens at the application services layer? So it's great now that, when a customer or user has few workloads, so they have few containers, it's easy to manage. Developers can do some of the, groundwork, underlying work into their code. But imagine when you have microservices like 500, thousands of microservices, how do you manage it? Who's responsible for writing the security? How do you deploy it? It is, how do you look into whether the, traffic is flowing? So with all these challenges, we want, we'd like to make sure that, the strain on developers is not much, because developers should be focusing more on the features, functionality of the business logic rather than worrying about the underlying layer. So with that, we would like to hand over to Scott about application services in Kubernetes.
Thank you, Uday. Yeah. So to provide some context around the application services on Kubernetes, I like to think about it in a couple of ways that I've heard from our customers and have seen in the industry. So, just to give some context, and then we'll dive in a little bit around mesh and Istio in particular. So one, and Uday touched a little on this, a lot of enterprises are moving from traditional data centers to the cloud. This has been ongoing for quite a while. It's great in that it enables a new set of capabilities and access to resources more than what they could effectively do within their own data centers or building that out themselves, which is great. And however, it provides some new challenges for organizations because they're moving from an environment, their own data centers on premise, where they have complete control over the environment and the security and setup of that. Now they're moving into locating their services into clouds and other SaaS providers and other environments. And so this provides some new challenges for organizations as they take advantage of these new capabilities that provides. So that's one big kind of trend that's been ongoing for a while. And relevant to application services, application teams take advantage of that. The second area is around the application. I'll frame it as sort of the tension, the partnership between application developers and the operation teams that support them. Like you said, Uday, the application teams are feeling an enormous amount of pressure to deliver new capabilities, to innovate faster, to enhance customer satisfaction, to address new market challenges, to enter new markets. So application development teams are being pushed very hard to move very, very fast in providing new capabilities to their customers. in partnership with them is the operation teams who have to keep those applications running and available, so they provide high quality services to their customers, as well as keeping all of that secure within their environment. And there's a sort of a tension that happens. Both teams are trying to meet the larger goals of the enterprise of better address customer needs, address new market challenges, enter new markets. They all want to accomplish that, but they have these sort of competing interests of rapid change on the development side with the ability, the need to almost slow down and keep it stable so that it's highly reliable and secure, and that it can be operated effectively and cost efficiently. So there's this sort of tension that a lot of teams are dealing with. And then the third area that application teams are dealing with, and especially relevant to the Kubernetes world, is modernization. So there's still a lot of movement to containerizing applications. Generally, this involves microservices. How can I take my monolithic applications and break them into more manageable chunks that allow me to work better in terms of leveraging capabilities like Kubernetes in the environment, like the cloud, as well as deal with the people challenges around how can my teams collaborate better around this. And so app modernization, brings a lot of benefit. When teams accomplish that, they can achieve a lot of goals, but it brings in a lot of additional change, complexity, new technologies that the teams are trying to learn, potentially new programming languages that are better suited to those containerized technologies or serverless or other environments. So there's a lot of, again, churn that the application teams are trying to deal with. So, given that kind of context of organizations moving away from infrastructure they had a lot of control over to the cloud environments where they have a lot of resources, but they have a little less control over that. How do they deal with that? How do we deal with the competing interests of speed to deliver market capabilities as well as keeping things secure and resilient? And all within the backdrop of how can applications teams better adopt technologies like Kubernetes to meet all of these needs and all of the change that comes around that. So we see that as sort of the bigger application challenges. And I guess the last thing I'll say on this front, and then is what we also see is in that context, we're also seeing a lot of companies need, like in the case of Mirantis, that they need more Kubernetes clusters out there. So a lot of organizations started a few years ago with having sort of one big cluster that they ran, maybe themselves, and maybe eventually moved to the cloud. And that was fine 3, 4, 5 years ago. Now we're seeing a lot of organizations have many Kubernetes clusters that they're managing, again, on-premise and in the cloud, to support full life cycles, developer, QA, staging, production for each application team. So they have many, many, many of these environments that they have, and then therefore they need a lot of these kind of application services on top. So that's sort of the bigger context. I'll frame it. And what we see at Tetrate is that service mesh is a foundational piece that helps these organizations scale. So Dave, we can go to them. Yeah. So
yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead.
So Scott, we heard a lot about Istio, right? And this is where how does Istio address these challenges?
Yeah. So let me touch on that in the next couple of slides. So just to give use the slides as kind of backdrop. So we think service mesh itself is foundational to help many of the application challenges, particularly for organizations that are using Kubernetes. So it helps with security constraints. It helps with a lot of advanced networking options, canary deployments, A/B market testing, where I can do weighted traffic shifting across the application services. service meshes give me hooks to gain better observability into my application traffic. Where is it? Where is the traffic flowing? Is it flowing like I expect? If there are issues, where are those issues? And give me some metrics that can give me some insight into why there might be a problem. And then overall, just reliability concerns around, combining a lot of those other areas, as well as making it easier for me to tap into multi-region environments or to deal with better failover patterns. So that's kind of the larger context for service mesh. And then if we drill down into that, on the next slide, we can see that for Istio itself, I like to talk about this in the context of sort of 3 layers. To your point, Uday, around the question around what is sort of Istio. I like to frame it in sort of these 3 layers. So Istio itself, a lot of people talk about as control plane and data plane. This is the classic way that people talk about Istio, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And this helps within a Kubernetes cluster, and can also, Istio itself can expand out to non-containerized workloads as well. It's not dependent on Kubernetes, though it is mostly deployed within those environments. So it can help with non-containerized workloads as well. So that's the control plane and data plane are traditionally where Istio is thought of. And then I always like to talk about the idea of a management plane on top. And the management plane is something that's been made very popular by the cloud environment. So when you deal with any of the major clouds, Amazon, Azure, Google, you're going to see that console you're interacting with is their management plane. And its management plane is about managing many virtual machines, many Kubernetes instances, many networking resources. So the management plane gives you that interface to tie those pieces together. And this is also where Tetrate and Mirantis provide products to help on this front as well, to manage, in the case of Tetrate, many Istio environments, and in Mirantis' case, to manage many Kubernetes environments. So I like to think of this kind of 3-layer approach to this technology. So if we drill a little bit into, say, bottom up, we'll look at the data plane and kind of drill into how does Istio do these kind of magical security, connectivity, observability things. Within the data plane, the idea that what a lot of application teams were doing before is incorporating code libraries to do common service discovery, security, circuit breaking, rate limiting, all those kinds of capabilities. Netflix OSS and Spring Cloud being one of the more popular ones, but many different frameworks out there. One or more for each programming language that's in common use. That was great when they came out there, but there were challenges in terms of operationalizing that. It's very difficult to keep all of the applications at the same versions of those frameworks. There's inconsistencies across the different frameworks, so it's again an operational challenge to deal with different languages and different frameworks. So this is the kind of genesis for the idea of Envoy as a proxy, and say, let's pull those common concerns out of security, connectivity, observability. Let's pull them out into a proxy and associate that network proxy with every single application workload that's deployed out there. So it deals with all those. The Envoy proxy, the data plane, deals with all of the network traffic in and out, and it's paired with your application services. Now, in the case of a Kubernetes environment, a pod is the core building block for Kubernetes, and a pod is one or more containers running in that environment. So your workload would be one or more containers in a pod, and an additional container, Envoy, would be sidecarred into that pod and manage, again, all of the traffic in and out of that environment. So that's a little of how the magic happens relative to the services. Envoy can also help with common concerns of what are called ingress and egress within Kubernetes. So it can deal with helping manage external traffic, external to the cluster, get that in and out of the cluster and the services running inside of your cluster. And Envoy can help with that as well, because it deals with things that are the layer 4, sort of the TCP, UDP layer, as well as at the HTTP layer, so it can deal with all of those kind of common concerns. So that's great. That's a quickie kind of view of here's what the data plane does. And that's great, but a lot of organizations have tens, hundreds, thousands of these services deployed. This is where the Istio control plane comes into play. So the control plane is about managing the fleet of Envoy sidecars within your environment. So it can deal with the configuration issues around that and make sure that configuration is consistently applied. It can help with service discovery within the environment, so that can influence the configuration that you've applied in terms of failover or weighted traffic routing. Istio also adds in certificate management and rotation capabilities. So mutual TLS being one of the big features that Istio brings in terms of authenticating and encrypting all traffic between all of the services. Istio will also allow you to define rotation patterns. So you can rotate in new X509, the TLS certificates for your environment, and you can set up a rotation pattern on that to keep it even more secure. So even if one certificate is compromised, it will be rotated out in a few hours so that you can, again, mitigate against any potential breaches in your environment. So it keeps it very secure. And then again, Istio can help with kind of providing observability hooks into your environment. So that's Istio. That's sort of traditional Istio, is that control plane and data plane, and it's great within a single cluster. But like I said earlier, we're seeing a lot of organizations start to deal with challenges of needing applications to work in multiple clusters environments, which could be as simple as I'm deploying into the cloud and I've got some of my services running in east and some in west. How do I manage that? This is where things like the management plane help, and this is where Mirantis and Tetrate provide products to help with managing multiple Kubernetes environments in the case of Mirantis, and Tetrate Service Bridge in terms of managing multiple Istio environments. So if we wanted to talk a little more about Tetrate Service Bridge.
So yeah, so we have Istio, right? And how does what does Tetrate Service Bridge do?
Yeah, thank you. So one of the flagship product that Tetrate provides that works very well with Mirantis's Kubernetes support and its cloud container support is this Tetrate Service Bridge. So this is that management plane level that works with helping organizations manage multiple Istio deployments. So Istio is great. We love Istio. We also have another product that deals with an Istio subscription. So all you want is just help with a single Istio deployment with some maybe with FIPS compliance around it, things like that. We have an Istio subscription as well. That's great. We love Istio. We're very big participants in the Istio upstream communities. But what we've heard from our enterprise customers is many need more help with that. Istio provides a somewhat low-level interface that you're managing, and organizations want some help in terms of how can I map my teams, the people teams, to the sets of services and allow me to provide consistent security policies across that, provide common observability capabilities across all of the different services and clusters that are being managed and all of the kind of application services that are being controlled. And again, this is really where Tetrate Service Bridge comes into play. So it can help with a lot of those concerns. It can also help, and I guess all the levels as well, it can also help with things like security across clusters. So Istio itself does a great job with mutual TLS, this authenticated, encrypted communication between services within a cluster. And then Tetrate Service Bridge can coordinate to make sure that cross-cluster traffic is also secured and that those access and security policies are put into place, just as one example of that kind of broader capability. And all of this is in service of, kind of addressing those common customer concerns that we've seen, to kind of bring it all the way back. The application teams, Uday, on the next slide, what we've seen is a lot of companies are looking as they adopt Istio, and they're looking at things like Tetrate Service Bridge, this is really about helping kind of fill that gap to allow these application developer teams and operation teams to work more effectively, to allow every enterprise, in fact, to figure out how they want the separation of duties. And in some cases, they can deal with that on a team-by-team basis. Some teams may be more mature around their kind of application hygiene, if you will. And so some organizations may give them a little more latitude around defining how their services interact. Maybe all their services can access each other by default. That would be their security policy. Whereas other teams, maybe they have a little more restrictive policy in place. Tetrate Service Bridge allows an organization to tailor how these teams work based on the actual dynamics of those teams and what's appropriate for how the maturity of those teams as well as the regulatory concerns that they're dealing with. So that's one way that we're helping, based on our interactions with his customers have been adopting Istio. Tetrate Service Bridge kind of fills that kind of gap. Secondly, we're seeing a lot of teams that as they scale this out within organizations, just like with Mirantis, they're seeing the idea of a common platform. Kubernetes has come in a very common container infrastructure platform for organizations. It's the common way that all applications are generally being deployed these days. And Istio is kind of that common set of application services to address those common security and connectivity concerns that customers have out there. So Tetrate Service Bridge, again, allows that common infrastructure and tooling so that you can integrate that in with your other services, security, PKI infrastructure, monitoring infrastructure, so it can be integrated once and then allow all of your application teams to interact with it. It can also act as that common way that things, especially around security teams, can apply policies, sort of policies and practices in, again, a consistent way. Even though they're dealing with different application teams that are addressing different markets with different needs, that consistency can make this overall more scalable for organizations. And security and risk is sort of the last thing. We're seeing a lot of, probably a couple of years ago with Istio adoption, we saw a lot of organizations getting excited about things like canary deployments and AB, and there's still a lot of customers doing that. These days, with the market, with things like SolarWinds and Colonial Pipeline and others, we're seeing a growing threat around security. And the need is particularly as the adoption of cloud is accelerating, we're seeing a lot more organizations and security organizations that are actively adopting these technologies to help provide those consistent security enforcement points and practices within their organizations. And I would say Istio itself provides a great tool that's sort of been lacking in the security world. It's a challenge to provide common enforcement points. How do you provide a hook to do all of your security enforcement at all of the different services and applications deployed in the organization? So every tool would do authentication really well, or authorization really well, or image scanning, but how do I kind of get that kind of common hook across the infrastructure so that I can hook in these really cool technologies to do the security part? And this is, I think, where Istio really helps with that common proxy. It gives that common hook for all of these different kind of security technologies to come into play, and gives your security organizations within the enterprise a common way to control policies and to audit the enforcement of those policies. And this really helps, especially with regulated industries, but just broadly as companies go in there into the cloud and are looking to have greater confidence around how, are those deployments safe and secure, and they can provide that level of confidence to their customers.
Great. So I think you summarized it very well, Scott, how Istio helps application developers. So with the combination of Istio Service Mesh management plane, which you talked about, because every enterprise has, n number of clusters. How do you manage it? How to make life simple for developers so that they can spin up clusters. Same thing with operators, where they can lifecycle manage the clusters, whether it's upgrade or canary deployment or staging dev. So I think the Istio and the Mirantis Container Cloud, Mirantis Kubernetes Engine provides a real good solution for customers to deploy Istio.
No, agreed. And I think the combination of the two and the ability to, again, support that larger trend of customers deploying more Kubernetes environments, spinning them up and down as needed, sort of infrastructure as code, getting that ability, like with Mirantis, the management plane it provides in the cloud for Kubernetes, combined with Istio and those kind of base application services. To your point, this is going to really give a strong platform for enterprises to accelerate their adoption and sort of modernization of their applications out there, and do that sort of effectively and efficiently.
Right. The final slide is, for more information, please visit Tetrate Istio subscription and Mirantis. There's training, Kubernetes, all the information that you need. It's on these websites. We posted some of the links here. So.
Yeah, no, this is a great set of resources, and the education resources on the Istio side. There's some free resources that are listed there to people want to get hands-on and deeper with that. That's great. And I know Uday and myself, we would love the opportunity if you just want to have someone to talk to and figure out how our companies can help. We would love to engage with you directly.
All right. So let's open up for questions. So I see one question. So Scott, Istio, due to rapid changes with Istio, I mean, it was really challenging for users to update or upgrade from one version to the other. How is it production ready now, or could you comment on that?
No, that's a great question. So the Istio itself has evolved, has gone through a lot of changes rapidly within the community. I would say it's very much stabilized, and I think it's very much become the kind of de facto standard for service mesh at this point. There's broad customer and kind of ecosystem adoption of Istio itself. So you're seeing it kind of used either directly or indirectly within a lot of other technologies. And the open source community itself has grown dramatically and getting lots of contributions from many, many large and small enterprises out there. So we're seeing the community is very robust and kind of open. Some of the early challenges of governance around that, I think, have been mostly addressed. So I think that in that sense, it's very much enterprise ready at this point, and we're seeing a lot of adoption around this.
Great. So other question that is coming is anybody, any customer, large customers using Istio in production?
Yeah, so that's a great one. So we're seeing, and you'll see this at a number of sessions. So in terms of public people we could talk to, so there's a great presentation that FICO did recently at IstioCon. I guess the fact that there's even an IstioCon, I think it's now its second year, is also kind of a testament to the kind of adoption and acceleration of this environment. But FICO and their head of enterprise architecture, Jeet, did a great job talking about how FICO, within their core FICO score engine, had migrated from a homegrown solution to do my earpiece falls out. So Jeet did a nice job. Can you hear me, Uday?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. My own personal technical challenges here. So Jeet did a nice job talking about how FICO, like many large organizations, had kind of built their own technology to address these kind of common mesh concerns. And Jeet talks about how they migrated from that to Istio to pick that up and to actually gain some of the other capabilities that the Istio community was providing and evolving much faster than what FICO could do themselves. And FICO is using this within their global deployment of the FICO score engine. So they're in all kind of the 7 major global regions around the world, and they're using Istio to manage all of the security and network connectivity around this. Jeet made a great point around, you know, they've always been sort of PCI and kind of HIPAA compliant with all of the, you know, the precious information that they're managing around all of our financial scores. They've always been, you know, absolutely compliant with all of those technologies. But what Jeet said is that Istio allowed them to actually go beyond that and do a better job at securing that environment for their customers, so they could provide a higher level of confidence around it, rather than just kind of checking the box and saying, yes, we're PCI compliant. They actually were able to give a much greater assurance about it because of what Istio provided. And they're now in the process of evolving that to deal with greater concerns around like data sovereignty, so that when they have service failures in their environment, and any large scale distributed application is going to have failures, he's talking about that Istio is providing them services so that they can fail over within the data sovereignty region. So within Europe, relative to GDPR, or the United States, or within China, or other areas, so they can make sure that they comply with regulatory and privacy concerns, even in the result of failures, so that they can kind of keep that service available and secure and compliant to their customers. So it's a great example. There's some other great talks that Square's talked about as well, very similar kind of pattern of moving from homegrown to Istio, and actually seeing that Istio help enhance their security profile with the greater certificate rotation capabilities. So we're just seeing that heavily. I guess maybe the last one I'll talk about is within the US government, the Department of Defense, the Air Force in particular, has an initiative called Platform One that has adopted Istio itself. And there's a lot of work on that, and that's being broadly deployed. There's a lot of strong partnership with NIST around this, and kind of the standards around how to secure microservices are intimately tied to Platform One, and Istio is a key part of that as well. And there's some great talks that Platform One and the NIST teams have done as well around this. So a lot of great resources, a lot of depth of information that's publicly out there around customer adoption.
Great. Thanks, Scott. I think we have one more question, which is, you know, customers have adopted API gateways and, you know, ingress controllers. How does Istio service mesh fit into those? Do customers have to disable those services, or, you know, it's a lot of investment that went, right? So if you could touch on that, that would be great.
Yeah, in the early days, there was a belief that the technologies were different, that mesh was all about what people talk about as east-west or service-to-service, and that API gateways, as part of potentially a larger kind of API lifecycle set of products, was needed for what people talk about as north-south, or that ingress, egress, and external traffic in. So there was a belief in the early days that those needed to be separately managed and separate concerns. And certainly if you have a very large API deployment, the API lifecycle technology and all of the extra capabilities it provides are certainly were important and still are much important. Istio itself has evolved pretty rapidly, so in its use of Envoy absolutely can address both technical concerns around how to manage the external internal traffic, deal with the security and traffic routing concerns on that, and certainly deal with all of the service-to-service concerns. And what we've heard from our customers is that not only can it technically do that, but what they want, the customers want a consistent way to configure both edge and service-to-service mechanisms. So they want one way to manage those the security policies, the traffic routing policies, how to monitor that, potentially introduce things like web application firewalls. In some cases, they want to introduce firewalls within their clusters because there's maybe a set of services that there are greater security concerns or SaaS usage or other things. So they actually want to have web application firewalls, which is historically thought of as an API gateway technology only at the edge, but they want to use that within their organization, just as one example. So we're hearing that from a lot of companies that they want that consistent environment, and that's a lot of what Tetrate is doing, is providing that common framework to allow customers to manage both external, internal, as well as system-to-system communication and cross-cluster. Again, in that spirit, I touched on it earlier. As customers roll out more clusters, how do I actually do things like mutual TLS and security access policies across clusters and deal with that in a consistent fashion that aligns to those application team needs? So we're seeing a lot of demand for that, and certainly the technology itself, Envoy is a great technology to do that, and making sure that you've got an application model that allows you to kind of deal with all of those concerns in sort of one consistent way, I think is very important to certainly platform operators out there.
Right. Thanks, Scott. I mean, I hope these questions help our audience on the Istio and where it's come from and how things are progressing. So, any other questions? So there's a question, understanding the support model when customers face issues deploying Istio with Mirantis platform. So I think, when we work with our partners, we have a single point of contact. It doesn't matter, customers can reach to Mirantis or Tetrate to resolve any support issues. Okay. Great. If there are no more questions, I hope this discussion on Istio Service Mesh, helped our audience today, and we'll have a lot more collateral and demo on our website as well as Tetrate's website. Feel free to reach us. Talk about Istio, how it fits into your environment, your applications, and how it helps, ease your development and operation cycles. Scott, any last minute words?
No, thank you. As always, a pleasure to chat with you, Uday. Thank you again for the opportunity to jointly present with you. Very much appreciate the partnership between the two companies and all the help we're providing to our joint customers. So thank you again.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, all.
Hi, Uday, and hi, Scott. So from Mirantis side, we would like to thank both of you for this great presentation and taking those questions. It was really a pleasure to be part of this particular webinar. From Tetrate and Mirantis side, we want to especially thank all our attendees for taking the time out to attend the webinar, to attend this particular webinar. So really, appreciate your time. So this concludes our session. We will catch up in another webinar with another interesting topic. So have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much.